Tonight, we dive into a case that shocked an entire community. A story of relentless cruelty inside the walls of an ordinary high school, a teenager pushed past his breaking point, and a murder that left a town forever scarred. This isn't just about one victim or one suspect. It's about silence, it's about neglect, and it's about how unchecked bullying can spiral into something far darker than anyone could have imagined. You are welcome to Crime Discovery Channel. This is where you discover true crime, stories, and mysteries. Please subscribe to our channel and don't forget to click on the notification button to get notified anytime we upload a new video. This is the haunting story of Ethan Miller, Jake Thompson, and the murder born from years of torment. Cedarwood, a quiet American town, population just under 20,000. A place where neighbors wave, kids ride bikes down long suburban streets, and the Friday night football game feels like the heartbeat of the community. But behind this postcard setting, inside the hallways of Cedarwood High, another world existed. One where power belonged not to the teachers, not to the rules, but to a handful of students who set the tone, and among them, none shone brighter or darker than Jake Thompson. Jake was a star athlete, captain of the football team, handsome, charismatic, adored by his classmates, and protected by his parents' influence in town. But for those who fell outside his circle, Jake was something else entirely. A predator, a bully, someone who fed on weakness. And for Ethan Miller, Jake was a nightmare that wouldn't end. Ethan was 16, quiet, withdrawn. The kind of kid who slipped through the cracks. He wasn't an athlete, wasn't popular, and didn't care to be. He loved sketching. Art was his escape, his refuge from a world that seemed determined to chew him up. But to Jake, Ethan was an easy target. He was small, pale, soft-spoken, with second-hand clothes that never quite fit. The perfect victim in a school culture that rewarded cruelty. The bullying started small. Snide comments in the locker room, a shove in the hallway. But soon, it escalated. Jake and his friends began recording their torment, uploading clips to social media. Ethan tripping in the cafeteria, Ethan's sketchbook ripped apart, Ethan's face red with humiliation. It became entertainment. And for Ethan, it became unbearable. The worst part? No one intervened. Teachers saw, but looked away. Administrators dismissed it as kids being kids. Even when Ethan's art project, something he had spent weeks creating for a school competition, was destroyed in front of him, the blame somehow shifted back to Ethan. He should toughen up, some whispered. He brings it on himself. But inside Ethan, something was breaking. He started writing in a journal. At first his entries read like pleas for help, but as the months dragged on, the words grew darker. He filled page after page with sketches of knives, of shadows, of revenge. It wasn't a cry anymore. It was a warning. On the night of the spring dance, Ethan reached his breaking point. Jake and his friends cornered him outside the gymnasium. They pushed him, mocked him, called him names in front of Clara, Ethan's only real friend. And then Jake spread a rumor that Clara and Ethan were secretly involved, twisting it into a cruel joke, taunting Ethan with the idea that Clara only pitied him. The crowd laughed, phones recorded, and when Jake punched him, leaving him bleeding on the pavement, no one stepped forward. That was the moment, the spark, the final humiliation. Ethan went home in silence that night, but he didn't sleep, he didn't cry, he planned. A week later, Jake stayed late at the school football field, running drills under the floodlights. He didn't notice the figure watching him from the shadows. Ethan had been following him for days, studying his routines, waiting for the moment he'd be alone. What happened next remains a blur even in court testimony. But what we know is this. Ethan confronted Jake. Harsh words were exchanged. Jake laughed, taunted, shoved him, and in a moment of blinding fury, Ethan snapped. The knife he had hidden in his hoodie came out. A struggle, a scream cut short, and then silence. Jake Thompson, star athlete, hometown hero, laid dead on the turf, blood soaking into the ground where he had once triumphed. Ethan fled into the night. The next morning, Cedarwood awoke to horror. Jake's body was discovered by a janitor. The town was stunned. The golden boy of Cedarwood High was gone.
Police swarmed the school. Theories spread like wildfire. Some whispered about gang retaliation. Others insisted Jake must have been caught up in drugs. But when investigators began digging, all trails pointed in one chilling direction: Ethan Miller. At first, police had no murder weapon. The knife was missing. But Ethan's behavior drew attention. He was absent, shaken, and Clara, his friend, noticed blood on his hoodie. Soon, detectives obtained a warrant. In Ethan's room, they found the journal. Dozens of pages filled with disturbing imagery, drawings of knives, revenge fantasies, words like justice and enough. To investigators, it looked less like art and more like a confession. Ethan was arrested within days. The town was divided. Some saw Ethan as a monster, cold, calculated, dangerous. Others whispered about what Jake had done for years, the cruelty he inflicted, the system that failed to protect kids like Ethan. But sympathy could not erase the fact Jake was dead and Ethan had blood on his hands. The trial of Ethan Miller became the most sensational event Cedarwood had ever seen. Reporters filled the courthouse, parents clutched their children, and inside, a 16-year-old boy sat accused of murder. The prosecution painted Ethan as obsessed, unstable, dangerous. They showed the jury his journal, his sketches, his search history about knives. They argued this wasn't self-defense, it was premeditation. The defense countered with a different story. They brought in witnesses, other students, who admitted Jake had bullied them too. They described teachers ignoring warning signs, administrators silencing complaints. They argued Ethan acted in desperation, pushed to the edge by years of relentless torment. Clara took the stand. Her testimony was heartbreaking. She spoke of Ethan's isolation, his pain, his cries for help that went unanswered. But she also admitted she suspected what he had done. Every word hung heavy in the courtroom. After weeks of testimony, the jury deliberated. The town waited. When the verdict was read, the silence was suffocating. Guilty of second-degree murder. Ethan collapsed, sobbing. Jake's parents sat stone-faced, their grief masked by anger. And Clara wept quietly, knowing the boy she once called her only friend would spend decades behind bars. But the story doesn't end there. Years later, during renovations at Cedarwood High, a discovery was made. Inside Jake's old locker, hidden behind a loose panel, was a knife. Its blade was clean, but its presence raised questions. Had Jake carried a weapon too? Was he planning something that night? Or had someone else hidden it, desperate to protect the image of Cedarwood's golden boy? We may never know. What we do know is this: bullying doesn't just leave bruises. It leaves scars. Scars deep enough to destroy lives, to fuel rage, to ignite tragedies like this one. Ethan Miller wasn't born a killer. Jake Thompson wasn't supposed to be a victim. But in a world where cruelty was tolerated, where silence was easier than intervention, both became casualties. And Cedarwood will never forget. This case is a reminder. Behind every quiet cry for help, behind every act of cruelty dismissed as kids being kids, there may be a storm brewing, one that, if ignored, can erupt into something unthinkable. The tragedy of Ethan and Jake is not just a story about a murder. It is a warning. Because in the shadows of silence, monsters are made. Thank you for watching and staying with us. Please like, share, and comment where you are watching from, and tell us what you think about this video. See you in our next video.